Recognition, power, and influence is your birthright, and this podcast shows you how to get there. Welcome to episode number 244. Today's episode, I am teaching you how to not only embrace the labels that have been given to you as a woman in leadership, but how you can begin to use those labels to your advantage to not only set you apart from the crowd, but to actually show them that you are a confident, powerful executive leader right now, and you are ready for those higher levels of leadership, not just because of the labels, but because of the way that you embrace the labels and you bring other people along for the ride. All right, let's get started.
Welcome to Women Changing Leadership. I am your host, Stacy, and I teach you how to get promoted, get paid, and bring your whole self to the leadership table. I am on a mission to change organizations from the C-suite out because women are the new face of leadership, and we are doing it on our terms.
Hello, corporate badasses. Welcome to another episode of Women Changing Leadership. I am your host, Stacy Mayer, and super excited, as always, to be here with you again this week. In the United States, we are celebrating Labor Day this weekend. So I always think of Labor Day as the official into summer, but as we know, it's not actually the end of summer. So we'll continue celebrating the Summer of Magic for the next couple of weeks. But I wanted to use this as a reminder to you if you are kind of feeling like summer's over, the magic is over, and you're getting back into the swing of things. Maybe you are looking for your next big leadership role and you've been interviewing for job opportunities and you feel like maybe they've dried up at this point, or you would like to reach out to some old contacts, but you haven't heard from them, so you're not really sure what to say. I want to remind you, first of all, that it is absolutely not only possible that you could finally get that opportunity that you interviewed for back in July, but it's actually more probable right now. And the reason is because of summer itself. Because if you're the person who is getting back into the flow of things, you're feeling like you are getting busier right now, so are they. They were maybe checked out over the summer. Maybe there were many different executives on vacation doing different schedules. And now is the opportunity to really get back in front of them and to say, hey, I am interested in having a conversation with you again. Now, I really want you to listen to what I just said. I didn't just say, hey, I'm still looking for a job. I said, hey, I'm still looking to have a conversation with you, or I would really enjoy having a conversation with you, or what's on your schedule for the month? What big projects are you trying to solve for this fall or before the end of the year? I'd love to talk about them and see how I can support or see how I can add value. Even as I'm saying these statements out loud, I didn't think of these in advance, but each time I can think, what can make that statement sound a little bit more powerful, a little bit more direct, a little bit more executive leader-ish. And when you do that for yourself, then you're going to sound and appear and actually feel very empowered when you're reaching out to people. This is just something really incredible to keep in mind because you do belong in the room. You do add value to their team. So don't start out the conversation of, hey, I hope you had a great summer, just letting you know I'm still looking for a job. That sounds pretty funny even when I say it out loud, but I guarantee if you go back to your DMs on LinkedIn, you're going to see that you've actually said that a few times. So make sure that you're staying empowered. You continue reaching out to people because they got busy and they got distracted and they really need and value having you on their team. So reach back out to them for a follow-up conversation. And fingers crossed, because there is still so much more magic to be had in these final weeks of the actual Summer of Magic. And I really plan to celebrate you before it all ends up this year. Now, on to today's episode. Today we are talking about labels. And typically speaking, the term labels is not used very positively, and I think there is a reason for that. So what do you think of when I say labels? You think of putting somebody inside of a box. Maybe you feel like they're being unnecessarily labeled, like that's not the whole story. We don't really know the whole picture. You think sexism, racism, different types of isms that could work against us when we get labeled as a certain type of person or labeled by the way that we look. And like I said, that typically doesn't work for us. But I was having a really great conversation with my women inside of the leadership table, and we were having a conversation about labels and how labels can actually work to our benefit. And I 100% agree that this is true, because we can start to use labels that we actually want to be labeled as to get to tell the narrative of our story, the story that we really want to tell other people. So in today's episode, I'm going to uncover how you can discover what your labels actually are and really begin to shift the narrative and shift the label slightly so that it actually works to your advantage. And then maybe perhaps you can start to label other people, and that actually helps them produce better work for you. So somebody on your team. So how did this conversation start? Well, one woman in the leadership table was sharing that someone on her team was kind of a naysayer, that every time they were in a meeting, she would say something very negative. She was always pushing back. She seemed to bring the energy of the room down. She would derail the conversations about something that was unnecessary and kind of take the topics off focus. And all of that is not useful energy, obviously, to have on your team. And you can see where in a meeting that you're leading, it can feel very negative and have a really negative impact on the team. And that was what she kept saying was, the team is starting to notice. They're wanting me to do something about it. And I have tried to tell her about her behavior and that it doesn't help the group. And because we're a group of really powerful, badass women, some of the other women chimed in and said, having a naysayer on your team is amazing. And especially as you get higher up in leadership, it's really difficult to have a person that will tell the CEO no, who will actually be the devil's advocate in the room. And when you can be that person very powerfully, you become a real asset to the team. So then now my client starts thinking a little bit differently. And she's like, well, actually, I am glad that she does speak up. I just don't like when she does it and how she does it. And so then we started coaching on this concept of labels. And we came up with this idea that let's say that she is a contrarian and she's always going to point out a different reason, a different way of thinking about things. One of the reasons that somebody's quote unquote disagreeable qualities go south really quickly is because they feel really uncomfortable about that quality. Now, you might think about it too, like if you're the typical naysayer and you're always pushing up against it, when you feel uncomfortable about it, you're going to do one or two things. You're going to either push back very aggressively in a demanding way so that people hear you, or you're going to shrink back. And you're not going to share your opinions because you don't want to be seen as a naysayer. A lot of times, women will embrace their naysayer quality and then they will lean into it. And then it turns into that level of aggression and they seem very vocal. And you can actually hear it in the tone of their voice that they seem a little aggressive. And this is not the label aggressive just because a woman actually uses her voice. But I mean, that part of you where you start to get very anxious when you're sharing your opinion and you're like, yeah, I did get a little bit fired up and heated when I was sharing that opinion. So in this particular instance, we were talking to her about what if we embrace that she has this contrarian on her team and kind of normalize it with the woman, so that she can say, hey, I really value having that difference of opinion. And when you do this for yourself and you start to think about those things that you're labeled as that kind of make you feel uncomfortable and you don't really like being labeled as that thing, or you feel guilty about it because you think, oh, this doesn't work in this particular culture or organization, then you act weird about that particular quality because 90% of the time that quality is you. It's actually probably what got you the job. It's the thing that they wanted to hire you for. But you're not embracing it because you don't feel comfortable with it because you've received negative feedback in the past regarding that particular quality. And then you kind of contort it in some way. You either lash out and like use your opinion. You're like, screw it. If they don't like it, I'm just going to say it. Or you pull back and you stop sharing it. And so when my client can have really open conversations and embrace the fact that this woman is a naysayer, then she can have a conversation about that piece and be like, I really want you to share your opinion. I really want and value that different opinion on our team. We need that right now. And then she can also guide her as to how that opinion might be received by others. So then it kind of takes that negative charge out of it. And it says, hey, I'm going to help you be able to share your negative or your contrarian opinions more effectively so that more people in the room can actually listen to them so that it doesn't derail the conversation, so that people don't get caught up in that. And so when you can begin to embrace that with your people on your team, that can actually really work to your advantage. Now I want to flip it to you. When you can embrace that negative behavior with yourself, then you can, and I only say negative because you've been given feedback on it. Like none of this is negative necessarily. It's just how we feel about it. There was a woman on a panel interview that I was listening to. She really stood out to me, but she was sharing how she has built this relationship with her CEO where she is very contrarian to his opinions. And she said, it never really gets any easier. But I am so much more comfortable with the fact that I am always going to have a different opinion than him. And I have learned to teach him that I am going to always have a different opinion than him. And so along the way, what I've had to do is remind him that that's why he hired me. You didn't hire me to say yes to you all the time. You hired me to push back. And he said, oh, yeah, you know what? You're right. So that's an example of a label. You didn't hire me to say yes to you. You hired me to push back. And then he settles down and he's like, you know what? You're right. So we want to make sure that we understand what our labels are and how we're viewed by others. And so and typically you can look at your last performance review or the feedback that you've been given, and anything that is an obstacle, something that you're supposed to be working on, something that you need to change about yourself, might be that label that you've been labeled and now you feel really bad about it and you want to work on it. But instead, what if you decided to embrace it? What if you decided that that was your thing? When you take the Myers-Briggs personality assessment, and I do this personality assessment with all of my clients, and a lot of my clients are VPs, SVPs, and they've taken this personality assessment before. They know what their 4-letter type is, but think about the circumstances that you took it under. You took it as like a team development or something that was kind of like thrown into your leadership development program, and you kind of like check some boxes and you're like, okay, well, yeah, it says that I'm an introvert and intuitive. And it's like, what do I do with that? And so when I'm doing this assessment with women, I'm always showing them what do they do with that information. So there is something that comes up a lot on the Myers-Briggs, and it is under the thinking and feeling category. And a lot of my clients actually fall under the thinking category. And this is neither here nor there because feeling in Myers-Briggs terms is not really emotional. It's connecting with people at your organizations. And so we'll get also a lot of women who really value that as well. But on the T side, there is a category that manifests itself as questioning. And that is a particular label. So you tend to question people. You tend to ask a lot of questions. And in the Myers-Briggs world, that is the reminder there is that other people might not know why you are asking so many questions. And so what they do is they say, embrace that label, right? You are a person who questions things deeply. And then ask yourself, why do I question? Typically, it's because you want to know the answer. Typically, it's because you want to understand more. Typically, it's because you're actually not sure what their motivations were behind doing that thing that they decided to do or making that choice or that decision. But when you know that your questioning behavior might be misconstrued as negative and questioning that person, like they did a bad job because, when were we ever questioned as students in a class? It would be when we did something wrong. And so we get a little bit defensive. We push back. We're like, wow, she's always questioning me. I don't like my manager. She's always acting as if I'm doing things wrong. But then instead, let's say that you question people and you want to embrace that as a label or something that you do as part of one of your excellent leadership characteristics. Now you're just going to start telling people, like, I always ask questions. I always get to the root of things. So this is a way that you can start to use your label to work for you. You can say, literally, like those sentences. Yeah, I don't think saying I'm a questioner makes sense, but it's like, I always want to get to the root of it. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. It's not because you did anything wrong. It's because I want to know the root cause. So ask yourself, why do you ask questions all the time? And then just start saying that out loud. This is what I'm doing. I'm inquiring. This is my questioning stage. And then we'll move on to the plan or the strategy or the project after this stage. Right? So say your work, say it out loud. And people will start to embrace, including your boss who gave you that feedback on your performance review. Something else that happens to women a lot of times, and in particular the corporate badasses that I work with, is that they're smarter than the rest of the room. And so when you're smarter than the rest of the room, and people kind of know it, they're like, I think she has all the answers, right? And then, like, let's say we're not speaking up a whole lot about those answers because we don't want to appear as contrarian. So we kind of keep it to ourselves. Well, people still know that we have an opinion or that we have something to say that we're not saying. And so you want to make sure that you begin to understand what it's like for the other person who thinks of you as that person who is smart. And so let's say that you are smarter than some of the people on your team. And you want to explain something, or you've been told that you need to backtrack or you need to slow things down so that your team can keep up with you because people can't follow your train of thought. You're always like 2 or 3 steps ahead of them, moving faster than the speed of light. Go, 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 go. And then you need to find a way to bring your team along. So that would be a typical statement on your performance review. Maybe you've heard that before. All right. So now I first want you to know and normalize the fact that, hey, you're smart. You do put the pieces together. So let's not feel bad for even a single moment that you get ahead of your team, that you think faster than your team, that you think faster than other people. I think a lot of men would love that quality and they would embrace it and they would be like, look, I'm just smarter than the rest of the room. And like, but for women, this is hard. It's hard to think that we've isolated other people and that we've left people behind, even though we know that it's because we're smarter than them. We have put those pieces. Maybe we have done this job before and we're working beneath our pay grade. And so we are not really feeling like bringing other people along with us. When you embrace that about yourself, first of all, you stop doing weird things with that information. So back to the beginning is this typical, we either like go faster and be like, screw it, if they can't keep up, then that's their problem. Or we go so slow, or we don't share our opinions, or we kind of try and explain it, but they don't really listen to us. And then we're just frustrated and we're like, we just need to find a new job where people get us. Instead, what I want you to do is first embrace like, hey, I tend to go faster than other people in the room. You know, I do have a lot of background knowledge. I do understand this better than anyone else. And you can begin to say, hey, I'm always going to be about 2 steps ahead of you. and maybe not that exact way. I just realized that could be like kind of demeaning. But you could say, hey, I'm always moving really, really fast and making decisions really, really fast and clearly. And so what I want to do is make sure I bring you along. So feel free to raise your hand at any point. Make sure that you ask questions because I might be moving really, really fast. And when you can say that that's what you do, like I put the pieces together very quickly. Yeah, again, I just realized this out loud when I said faster than you, that's negative and rude. And so instead, you just want to talk about yourself. And so you say, hey, I put together pieces really, really quickly. So make sure that you come along, make sure you ask questions, interrupt me at any time. I have open office hours. I'm going to be moving very quickly. So now you're embracing this behavior, and then perhaps you're giving permission to the other person to interject. Maybe you take like a pause, like I'm just going to stop there for a second to listen, to take questions. Maybe you realize that that would be a good behavior shift. In Myers-Briggs as well, they call this enhancements. So you have your personality preference that you just have, and you're never going to change. But there are ways that we can enhance our communication strategies to bring other people along. Now, I am doing this episode because I want you, first of all, to understand what your labels are. The easiest way that you can understand that is to look at some of the negative feedback that you've received in the past. And this is how people view you. These are your labels. Then I want you to ask yourself, is this how I want to be perceived? Now, this is funky because when you ask yourself that question, it's going to be clouded with, but I want a higher paying job and I need to tone that down if I want a higher paying job, or I want to be included, so I need to change that behavior because my boss told me. No, say, you know what? I'm actually proud of this crap. Like, I love that I question things. I love that I speak up. I love that I move at the speed of light. I love that I am able to think about the bigger picture. I love that I am very knowledgeable on this subject. So first of all, figure out what it is that you actually want for yourself and like it. Actually genuinely like it. And say, you know what? I think this is actually what got me the job. This is what got me here. This is why they hired me. And now, then the third piece is figure out how to embrace that going forward. What is it that I'm going to say to people so that they understand this label of me? Not to leave them behind, but actually so that I can bring them along for the ride, so that I can remind them of these qualities. So many women that I work with want to be a great role model. This is their driving force for why they want to get into leadership, why they want to have a voice at the table, is so that they can lift other women up. And when we start to show women that we can not only be different, that we can not only think, act, and talk different from the rest of the leadership team and actually get into those higher levels of leadership, but then once we do it, we can be ourselves. We can embrace those sides of ourselves. We do that by embracing our labels and directing our labels so that we're directing the narrative of ourselves so that we are those women that we actually want to be. We are so powerful as women, and we dumb down that power to suit other people. And then when we elevate that power, we leave other people behind. This is a way that we can both embrace our, what I call authentic power, who we really, really are, but allow other people to come with us for that ride. Thank you all so much for listening. Let me know what labels you come up with. How do you let me know? A couple of different ways. You can direct message me on LinkedIn anytime. It's actually me who answers those messages. I would absolutely love to hear from you. You can also write a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please, so that you can share the message of this. You can say, Stacy taught me how to embrace my XYZ. Leave that on Apple iTunes or Spotify. Let us all know what this podcast has meant to you so that other women can begin to embrace their labels and bring so many other leaders along the ride, along the journey with us. All right. Thank you all so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye. Bye. Before you go, I have a question for you. Do you know how close you are to your next promotion? Really? Not what your boss has told you, not what you even believe to be true, but have you actually taken the time to sit down, take an assessment, review the 5 categories that it takes to get promoted into senior executive leadership positions and decided where you fall in each category and given yourself a ranking on a scale of 1 to 10 of how close you are to getting your next promotion? Have you done this? Well, now's your chance. If that feels interesting to you and you're like, hey, I want to know exactly how close I might actually be or how far away you might be and what it's going to take to get you even closer, then I invite you to take my promotability quiz. This is a quiz that I put together with practical tips that actually tell you where you're lacking and where you're winning. What are the areas that you actually need to improve and not necessarily what your boss is telling you all the time so that you can take concrete steps towards landing that next promotion and changing the face of the leadership table. Go to yourpromotabilityscore.com to take your free assessment today.